Welcome to the Explainer. Let's just dive right in. Imagine for a second that you had a crystal ball for your business. You know, a way to spot looming threats way before they actually hit your bottom line. Well, today we're unpacking a really fascinating concept that basically gives management teams and corporate boards exactly that kind of superpower. We're talking about key risk indicators, or KRIs. It's all about identifying business threats before they ever even get a chance to strike. Which brings us to a really fascinating question. How exactly do you measure a disaster that hasn't even happened yet? I mean, think about it. In business, we are so incredibly used to measuring things after the fact. But the true genius of a key risk indicator is its ability to act as an early warning signal for emerging risks. It's kind of like a futuristic tool. We are essentially trying to measure the shadow of the monster way before the monster actually enters the room. And this perfectly illustrates the difference between what we usually track and what we actually should be tracking. You've probably heard of KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. Well, KPIs measure consequences. They represent the past. They tell you where a risk has already crystallized and done its damage. It's honestly a lot like looking in the rearview mirror of a moving car. KRIs, on the other hand, they're the windshield. They focus strictly on causes and the future, showing you where a risk might crystallize so your team can steer clear. Moving on to the anatomy of a risk and understanding the cause and effect. So how do we actually build this windshield? Well, to create the right risk indicators, we've got to understand the basic DNA of a risk event. A risk doesn't just happen out of nowhere. There are always tangible causes behind it. Over on the far left, we have the cause. These are specific external or internal factors. If those trigger, they inevitably lead to that middle box, the risk event. And then finally, that event leads to the consequence on the far right, which is when your KPI takes a hit, like a sudden drop in profit. So if we actively track those initial causes on the left, we can accurately predict if the disaster will actually play out. Let's look at a case study, mortality risk, taking the macro view. Let's ground all this abstract theory in reality. Think about the life insurance industry. For them, a massive primary risk is mortality risk, which is simply when the actual number of deaths is higher than what the company anticipated. So, to find our KRIs here, we have to ask, what actually causes an unexpected spike in deaths? Well, it's things like outbreaks of diseases, extreme heat or cold, huge lifestyle shifts, pandemics, natural calamities, or even trends in drug and alcohol use. By strictly monitoring these exact indicators, the company can actually forecast if that risk event is heading their way. But hey, here's a really crucial distinction we need to make. Just because you can monitor a KRI doesn't mean you can control it, right? Except for things like alcohol and drug use, pretty much none of those other major macro factors, like the weather or natural calamities, can be controlled by a company. So they absolutely cannot be used for risk mitigation. You can really only watch a change in the weather as an early warning sign. Finding the cause is vital for creating your KRI, but remember, the factors you can actually control might be totally different from the factors you just monitor. So how does a business actually mitigate this stuff? If they can't change the weather, they control what they can measure at the individual level. In life insurance, they do this through super detailed medical underwriting and proposal form questionnaires. They assess a person's individual health and family history against their standard parameters. Basically, they're placing direct controls on the measurable individual causes to protect against the broader risk. People are strictly underwritten at normal rates only when they actually qualify as standard lives. Next up, our second case study, plummeting sales. Basically, a detective story. Okay, let's pivot away from life insurance to something almost every business leader has felt in their gut: missing revenue targets. Let's say a company keeps missing its numbers. Poor sales is the consequence. That's your KPI flashing red. Now, to manage this risk, we have to play detective and do some causal analysis. We literally have to walk backward from the painful symptom to find the root causes. Why exactly are sales tanking? Is the sales team too small? Are they just incompetent? Is the product uncompetitive now? Are we losing staff left and right, or do customers just not trust the brand anymore? We've got to dig in and investigate. And let's say our detective work pays off. Based on our analysis, we discovered that high staff turnover is the real culprit here. Boom, the KRI is revealed. It's the attrition rate of the sales team. Now the company knows exactly what to watch. Any sudden spike in that attrition rate acts as a highly accurate early warning signal, a key risk indicator that a drop in revenue is right around the corner. And that gives management the time to take action way before the sales actually fall off a cliff.
Now for calculating your risk and choosing the right metric.
All right, now that we know how to spot these indicators, how do we make sure we're picking the absolute best metrics mathematically? It all comes down to a really straightforward formula. Your KRI should always point to a change in one of two specific variables. Here it is. Expected loss equals likelihood multiplied by impact, which is usually measured in cold hard cash. For a key risk indicator to be completely valid and actually useful to the board, it has to signal a shift in either how likely a risk is to happen or how severe the financial impact will be if it does. Let's bring back our life insurance example and plug it right into this formula to see how it works. A new disease outbreak or crazy severe weather, that drives up the likelihood of higher deaths. On the flip side, if the company is selling way too much of a specific protection policy, like term assurance, that doesn't necessarily make it more likely that someone passes away, but it massively increases the financial impact or the claim amount when those deaths do happen. Both of these are totally valid KRIs because they feed straight into calculating that changing expected loss.
But here is the catch, and honestly, it's a massive one. The absolute first step to creating a KRI is actually admitting that risks exist in the first place. If you don't identify the risk, you can't build a KRI for it, period. And this exposes a really dangerous cultural trap. If you ask your frontline managers about potential threats and their immediate response is, "Oh, there is no risk," you've got a problem. If your organization is in denial or people are scared to speak up about vulnerabilities, creating these vital early warning systems is literally impossible. You can't measure a shadow if you refuse to even turn on the light.
Which brings us to our final thought today. I want you to look really closely at your own business. What early warning signs is your organization completely ignoring right now? Are you just staring in the rearview mirror at your KPIs, waiting for the consequences to finally hit you? Or are you actively tracking the root causes that are shaping your future? KRIs are an incredibly powerful way to get your management team and your board ready to take early action. So I challenge you, start doing that causal analysis today. Find those hidden KRIs and fix your windshield before you drive straight into a storm.